Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second session, part two. This is the Primacy MiSTAR operator training. Part one took place yesterday. We'll conclude today with the second session in the series. My name is Matt Tomlinson. I'm with Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I'll be working behind the scenes monitoring the technology. And before we get started and I turn it over to our speaker, I'm going to go ahead and go through these housekeeping slides. Want to remind everybody that all lines are muted during the webinar. We are recording this session and we will share the recording link with you within the next day or so. And you can interact with us, and you can do that by using the Q&A option on your Zoom toolbar. You can submit questions that way, and we will address those at appropriate breaks. There's also a raise hand icon on your Zoom toolbar. And if you'd like to ask a question in person or live, then you can raise your hand and we will unmute your mic and allow you to do that. And if you are calling in by phone, you can type #2 and that'll raise your hand icon and we can unmute your line that way. And when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll go back over these again. So if you don't have a question at the moment, but you've got one you want to enter, we will help get you in the queue so you can get your question answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter. Again, that's Jason Malu, and he is with Eagle's Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division. So Jason, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If you want to bring your presentation up. And we see you in presentation mode. I'm going to go behind the scenes.
Thank you very much, Matt. So thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to Primacy MiSTAR Informational Session Part 2. For those of you who were in Part 1 yesterday, some of these beginning points will be a little bit of a review, but for folks who weren't, there will be a view. My name is Jason Mayu. I'm the supervisor of the Gas Storage and Underground Injection Control Unit. I joined on with Eagle just about 1.5 years ago, and get this in laser pointer mode. And I put my contact information right up front and the date on the slide. I said yesterday I do that because when I see presentation, like these slides will be put out there, I want to know who to contact and when that presentation was from. Again, a little bit of a rehash from yesterday. It's been a long road for Michigan to get to Class II Primacy. And we covered yesterday that road, where we stand today in terms of the EPA still has primacy until August 29th. Some of what happens on the 29th and what rules kick in, and we went through all the Part 8 rules, which I apologize. I know that can get a little bit, maybe a little bit dry reading rules at you, but I thought I wanted to make sure we're all starting off on the same page. We then switched gears into a preview of the MiSTAR system, which is our paperless reporting system for injection data. So you can fulfill all those Part 8 requirements that we talked about. I have a couple quick housekeeping items kind of left over from yesterday. So I've had a lot of inquiries, which is great in the last day or so on, okay, you said the session was recorded. Where's that recording? It will be put up on the Eagle OGMD MiSTAR webpage. We're working through a process of getting that closed caption, so there might be a little delay on that, but we'll get the non-closed caption recording sent out to attendees, and that can be shared around. I'll make sure to get the PDF of the slides up on the website this week as well. So please stay tuned for that, but it'll all be up there. And I appreciate people who weren't able to make it being interested and wanting to see the recording. So I take that as a positive sign. So this is recycled from yesterday. If you're in the recording for day 2, you can get ahead right now to about slide 7. But again, just wanted a real quick hit on this. What's required to use MiSTAR? There's a touch, but I'd say not too much confusion around this. The signed and submitted letter of assurance. So that is a company level letter of assurance. That's one per company, signed by, they say, the principal of the company, saying, I authorize my company to use electronic data, electronic submission for injection data, and we'll do paper and electronic for a period of time just to make sure everything's in order. And then once we get the okay, we will do just the electronic reporting through MiSTAR. Second part that is required is the EQP 7213. That's the Well Permittee Organizational Report. And that is all the people that will be using MiSTAR or eForms for that matter on behalf of your company. So any individual who needs a username and login, put them on there along with and we'll get them processed through. So if you have the letter of assurance, you have who you want on there, everyone will get individual usernames and passwords. Now, we did see a flurry yesterday of people submitting both of these. And I will admit, I held off. There were some we could have sent out. I held off on sending out because I wanted to have like a moment to intervene and talk about MiSTAR before we had, ideally before we had it, folks just going into it and running around. So we have folks queued up. I think about a dozen or 15 folks queued up and just about ready to send out. So you'll also need a computer with internet access and a modern browser and an ability to create CSV or XLSX files. If you didn't see it yesterday, this is what the letter of assurance looks like. And it covers what I talked about earlier on. I won't go into depth on it, but we've received quite a few of these already. And so you just need to fill it out, sign it, and send it back in. Same thing with the EQP 7213. So we see who, either as an employee or as an agent, will be using MiSTAR, name, phone number, email address. And again, I know this is a repeat, but I'll stress the importance of that email address for both the letter of assurance and for the Well Permittee Organizational Report, so that we have an accurate accounting of who's in the system. So if any of those folks change, we'll want to change it so they don't have access, and any new people do have access, or just new people have access. But secondly, just to have that email list so that if we have a planned maintenance day, or we have an updated revision to the guide, or we have an updated anything, that we can let the users of this application know. So we want to make sure we're in good, close contact with everyone. And this is one really good way to have a list of all the users and be able to reach out to them quickly. So I was advised by our outreach group that live demos don't always go super smoothly, that they can have some bugs and issues. So I have a lot of slides that will be screen caps, and we'll stop and pause and talk about them. And then if it all works, we'll try a live demo just to give you a little bit deeper look and feel. If that crashes and doesn't work, just because of trying to work across too many platforms at once, we'll call it on there. And we can always have, if there are future questions, always have screen sharing and team sessions and whatever's needed to help operators along to be able to get these reports submitted. There's an awful lot of information out in a user guide, out on the webpage. There's a lot of information. There's a lot in here that's intuitive. There's a lot of information in these slides. So I think between these, and even in the front of the guide, there's a quick start guide that walks through kind of the general process. So there's a lot of resources out there for folks. And I kind of approach this, and I know there's people learn in different ways, but anytime I've done a software training, and I've actually sat in a lot of them, I always find, for me personally, if I'm trying to click along and follow, and it's step 1, step 2, step 3, and I'm trying to click along and type in and fill something out, almost invariably the person showing that material gets ahead of me and I get behind. And now not only am I not listening to what they're doing, but I'm also stuck where I am. And so I don't even see where the next steps go. So a lot of times with those, I sit back and I just watch, and I like to watch what a software is capable of and kind of roughly where the clicks are. And I feel like when I do that, I'm able to then reference back to something like a PowerPoint or a user guide and say, okay, I saw that, I remember it, I know where to go from here. So that's kind of how I've thought about this. Again, if that does not work for you, let me know. And like I said, we can have sharing screen sessions. The goal is to help people get in and use the software. One final note before we really get into this is you'll see these are screen caps. They're mostly blue and white and gray. There will be some changes to MiSTAR already, probably around the end of September. We had an ADA patch amongst a couple other things. And that's primarily just a look, font size, font, maybe a few colors. So you might see some colors change between this version and ultimately in a month or so, but the buttons are the same, the process is the same. You just might see a little bit of a look difference to it. So let's again, one more kind of review, a couple more review slides from yesterday. I spoke about, so we have pretty much, you get 6 choices. If you're an operator, really there's kind of 2 in 1, and don't use that one. So this EPA 7520, that's for us here on the state side to help us with our EPA reporting. If you remember, we're going from dual reporting to singular reporting for operators, but we still are audited and accountable to the EPA. So we talked a little bit yesterday, electronic data deliverables basically means a spreadsheet. So we took a form and we made it into a spreadsheet where you fill out some header information as well as some data information. If you want to submit an EDD, the first step is to click the Submit EDD button, and we'll walk through what that process looks like. If you want to make sure that your EDD went through, or you want to download one at a later date or double check something, you can always go into View EDDs, right? If it hasn't been submitted, you won't be able, you won't be able to view it really. Uic Wellbores, that's kind of at least my recommended first step. This is a list of all the wells in the state that are Class II that we have in the system. I think we have all of them, but if we don't, please take it, download it, compare it, cross-check to your list. If there's something missing or something that you think is incorrect, please let us know straight away. That EGLE OGMD UIC email address that I put out there yesterday is a good one, or you have my contact information from the first slide. This is a way to see what's out there and then drill down into any individual well information. What were the last injection reports? When was the last MIT? What were the last 4 quarters of QA of quarterly annulus data? All will be in there in detail by well. Documents, that's, I have it on a subsequent slide, but there's 4, I'll say, regulatory required EDDs. There's other ones as well that we'll probably have a little mini session to go over those. And those are the directional survey and the AOR tool. But there are regulatory requirements that don't necessarily fit neatly into an EDD. If you have, for example, an injected analysis, those can come in different forms, and that's not necessarily something you want to type in line by line. Well, that can come in as a PDF or an Excel or a document, several different formats, and it can be submitted here. So your regulatory requirements will be submitted through either an EDD or a document. Another example would be, an MIT chart or gauge calibration, something like that. Again, I'm going to kind of skip over this, but it's not because it's not a fantastic tool. There was a lot of time and effort put into the AOR EDD tool, but I'm not going to go into depth on the hows of it right this minute because it's not a regulatory requirement. I want to make sure we have the absolute requirements down, and then get some sessions out there for things that are not required but are very helpful. Well, notifications, 2 types. Those come in via an EDD. And those are either notice of a loss of mechanical integrity or notice of an MIT scheduled. So only 2 things come in there. And if you want to see, these are my losses of MIT. These are my upcoming scheduled MITs. You can go in there and take a look at them. So like I said, kind of 5 boxes for operators, 6 buttons. And I just have two more kind of review slides from yesterday, and then we'll move on from there. So we have EDD templates that were developed for, again, you see 5 here. It's really 4 EDDs for 5 different things, because these notification of a loss of mechanical integrity or a scheduling of a mechanical integrity test is done through a single EDD, and you just have to select or type out which one of the 2 you're doing. So we have 4 of them. 2 of them replace forms that you might be familiar with: the monthly or annual injection well operating report, and also the standard annular pressure test, EQP 7606, will be replaced by that EDD. And we have these final ones. QA, you reported to the EPA, but had not previously been required to report to the state. So we made an EDD for that. That's one I love to use as an example because it's very straightforward. Not too many fields to fill out. So it's a good test case to look at, kind of the look and feel of what these are. And again, there's an EDD finally for these last 2, and it's 1 EDD kind of with 2 flavors. And where EDDs were not feasible or didn't make sense, again, we don't want to have people having to transcribe an annual inject data analysis into a spreadsheet. You can send things and it says PDF, but yesterday's was correct. There's several different formats that are acceptable, and for all these different requirements. Inject data analysis centered around MIT records and commercial sources, quarterly or new. So out there on the UIC webpage, which I believe is posted in the chat, there's a user guide, and that includes several things. It is a dense document. There's 130 pages, give or take. Part of the reason it's very long, there's a lot of screen captures. So there are really click-by-click, step-by-step instructions for each EDD. So there's a general overview and then also each EDDs and other documents and the AOR tool and the directional survey. I mean, if you want to know something about a particular, how to submit a particular regulatory requirement, there is a section on it. And this is a point where Kerry Johnson, Kevin Carey, Mark Snow, Adam Wygand, Larry Organic, there have been a lot of people, I even got in there for parts of it. There's been a lot of people who worked hard to put this together. We may have we will have updates to it as we see things come up, but it's out there now. It even goes through, again, we've hit on it in both presentations. It's through the MiSTAR, or pardon me, the requirements to use MiSTAR in there, that quick start guide. And you'll see this is just kind of the front page, and even that there's an August 22 version. So this is not the most beautiful table of contents, but it goes through, this is what I'm saying, how to use MiSTAR, what are the reporting requirements, quick view, let's define our terms, make sure we're all speaking about the same thing. So there's a glossary. There's an overview of kind of these 3 sections, really, of how generally do the steps flow, but in detail. And then for each EDD or other document or other use of the system, there's several pages on how do I use it, where do I go, what is the process flow. So there's a lot of information out there. I took this directly from that guide and said, there really is kind of a quick start. So if you want to do what I'd say a lot of people do, I'll admit when I first started MiSTAR, and I think a lot of people do this generally, you take something and you use it until you're confused or it's not working the way you think, and then you go read the instructions. Well, I'm hoping people will read the instructions or follow through or look at this presentation, but if you don't, there's kind of a general flow to how this all works. And it's, you download your template of interest. So we have those 4 different EDDs. You save it, you fill it out, you upload it, and you validate and submit it. So kind of the general flow for any EDD, those are the kind of simplest steps that you can possibly take that would get you from point A to point B. If you kind of look at this in a flow chart, here's your 4 types of, these don't necessarily follow left and right. Here's your 4 types of different EDDs that you can have. So you log in, you select the one you want, you download it, you carefully fill it out, you look at the validation criteria, you look at the valid values, you make sure you've done it completely and correctly, and then you upload it. And if it's complete and correct, it will validate. If it's not complete and correct, it will tell you that there's validation errors. And one thing that I think is especially good about this, it really tells you what the error is. And I've used a lot of softwares where sometimes you get error, 308. You go, I don't know what 308 means for this error. This really, in my opinion, does a really good job of telling you, hey, this line is incorrect, or this is duplicate, or this is where your issue is. You can go in and change it, or you can scrap it and start again and resubmit. So I'm going to start again. So this is a little bit of the click-through portion of things. And this is this is a personal preference for me, but kind of what we're asking folks to do is I would start at the Uic Wellbores, because this again shows all the Wellbores we have. You can very easily filter it to your company, and you can download that and then compare it to what you have. One thing I said yesterday that you might be a little less used to is where I'd say in the past, the EPA or the state of Michigan have keyed off of permit numbers. This really keys off of the API. So if you don't have your well list and your API handy, you can pull it right down from here, no problem. So when you click View UIC Wellbores, you get this screen. And I'm going to spend a minute on here because really the look and feel of all the different kind of submodules in MiSTAR look very, very similar. So you get this kind of row of header values, and this will, obviously this would be populated with all the wells. If you do it straight away, you'll get unfiltered list of all the wells in MiSTAR. And there's a few important parts to point out. If you don't like this layout, you can hit customize, and that will bring up the option. So if you say, I don't want to know the county, I know the county, or I don't want to know the wellbore status, or I don't want to see last inspection, you just open this box, click those off, hit apply, and they won't be there. Alternatively, there's some other fields if you want to know the lat long or other such fields. You click customize, you click those on, click others off, and you can customize this. So that's what that customize button is. It really shows you what you want to see about that list. You can also search this list, but it's important to note you can search it by well name, API number, or permit number. So you have a few options, but if you just start typing in, if you want all the wells of your company under your company, and you start typing in your company name, you're either going to get no values returned, or you're going to get the wells that happen to have the name of your company in them, which is probably not the list you're looking for. Now, if you want to get to just the wellbores of your company, let's say, you can go into filter, and you can filter this list by not any number of criteria, but quite a few criteria. So this is where I would say you go to operator, you type your operator name, and you click away from it, and then you'll see the list of just the wells that are under that operator. And this is, again, you can do any number. These are all additive. So you can do operator and wellbore status. So it's all and searches. You'll see when you if you get too deep and you want to just clear them all and X will appear by filters, you click that X and you can start fresh again. But you can search them, like I said, by quite a few criteria, and I believe it begins with or contains. So if you want to know, really get any information about just about any well, if you want to really sharpshoot it, you can either know the well name, the API number, the permit. You can search by operator. You can search by many, many different criteria. So I decided, because I know that there are wells that would fit neatly on a PowerPoint slide, I put in West Bay, and this one thing to note, it's not case sensitive here, and just clicked away. And now I have those 3 wells, and it tells me something about those wells. And this is what I was talking about. If you then want to clear that, you can either clear it in here, or you can just hit X and it'll clear your filtered choices. And now you can take this and go right over here and export your data. So whatever filters you put on, that's what's going to come out to you on a filter on your export. So if you want just the wells by your company, and you can have API number, well name, whatever. You know, on this customize, you can put permit number right on here, and then you'll have permit number, API, well name, and the wells. But this is where, again, cross-referencing to the well list that you expect that you have, and letting us know if you see any discrepancies or errors will be important, because as I stated yesterday, the only folks that can enter data for a well are the operator of the well, or as per the 7213, the employees or agents on behalf of that operator. But you can't have one operator entering data for another operator's wells. It does not work like that. So again, I know that was kind of quick to run through, but I think that's ideally kind of an important first step, just to make sure what's in here is what you expect. And if you don't have your API numbers easily accessible, to kind of create your reference sheet for those. Oh, see, and then if you want to know detail about any of those wellbores, you just hit view, and that'll take you to one deeper page. And this will tell you anything you want to know about the well. And then you'll have 4 tabs here, and these should look kind of familiar as to the EDDs. So if you want to keep track of your EDDs on a particular well, you'll have your injection data, your pressure, annular pressure test, your well notification, your quarterly annual. So you can keep track of that for the life and the history of that well. So that is kind of in a very brief run through, however long that was, a 5-minute or so run through, kind of what the UIC Wellbores button section, submodule, whatever your preferred nomenclature is for it, is all about. There's a lot of information in there. I think a lot of very useful information. And I also think it's just a good introduction on really the look and the feel of MiSTAR behind what I've shown you as the main screen, and kind of behind these buttons. So now I'm going to run through what it would be like to submit an EDD. So what is it? What is the process? You know, I showed you the quick start guide and the steps, but what are the tips and tricks? How does it work? What buttons do you actually need to click? And then we'll go into kind of what the EDDs really look like. So if you click submit EDD, you will get this page, except the drop down won't be dropped down. This I believe says operator behind here. But you get those, really you get half a dozen choices. That's right, half a dozen choices. And again, for the regulatory requirements, you'll need the quarterly annual spill, the well notification, the annular pressure test, and the injection well operating report. So you just click any one of those, and you'll get just to the right of this a thing that says download template. So that's what we talked about. First, you need to select what you want, and second, you need to download that template. There it is. So I chose quarterly annual spill report because, as I stated, I like it. It's a very simple, straightforward EDD. So you just download this template, and when you click that, you get a nice button up here that says file downloaded wherever your downloads go. Again, you'll need to select your organization, and this is, you start typing and there'll pop up a list and you can select your operator from there. And description. Description is for you. That's for the operator. It's got a star next to it. It's a mandatory field, but that's meant for you to keep track of your files, to call it something that makes sense to you, something that is a reminder. So you might call it, you know, whatever you want. It could be operator name, QA, first quarter, 2022. Could be whatever you would like it to be that helps you keep track of it. It's not a field we regulate, but it's in there ideally to help you. So now you'll have ideally your template downloaded, your operator name you can fill in, and your description, whatever you want it to be, you can fill in. So now we'll dig into, you know, I've been dancing around these EDDs and what's in them, and they're just a spreadsheet. And I showed you one, for anyone who was in the session yesterday, just a very brief overview of what one looks like for an MIT. But in this case, we'll take a look at a quarterly annulus fill EDD. So you'll download this, you can recognize these cells. I open this in a spreadsheet tool. And this blue part is the header record. So this is like the information about the operator, about when, about, you know, just the kind of the general overview information, the top part of it. So in this case, we have the operator name, operator number. I should put, these are, I should note, this is just made up. I made this up. So this is not one that is submitted. I just did it for illustrative purposes. So I don't even know if that's someone's real operator number, but I just said this was me. This is made up data for the third quarter of 2022, and are these revised records or not? So that's going to be asked pretty much on any EDD, because sometimes mistakes happen, right? So we have a place for revised records, because if you just try and submit the same record twice, MiSTAR, the logic behind it is intelligent enough to know that, hey, this has already been submitted. I don't have a place for this. And it'll tell you. I actually did one when I was doing testing to make sure that I was screen capping all the clicks correctly. I said, oh, I'll be smart. I'll use one I already used that I know validates. I know it's all there. And it still said validation error. And I said, oh, what did I do? Unfortunately, as I said, the error descriptions are very good. And it said, this data is a duplicate. It already exists in the system. I said, that's correct. I know it does, because we already tested with this sheet. So relevant information, 14-digit API number, the well name and number, the amount of liquid added to the annulus, the date, and any comments. And we'll talk about what of all these fields is required or not. So each EDD, probably should put an overview, really has two tabs. It has this, which is the well header and the data record. And the second tab is the validation tab. And it tells you, if you're not sure, what do you mean by 14-digit API? What do you mean by report quarter? What do I need to put for that? And I think what's really good about the way that these EDDs have been created is you may or may not notice that I made these different in the last digit very cleverly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1, and 10, 11, 2. Again, those are obviously made up APIs and would not be appropriate for the state of Michigan, because they don't start with the right digits. But there's one well, I have this set up as one well and another well. So you can submit n number of wells on this sheet. So if you want to put all your wells for the quarter in here, each API gets its own line and piece of data. And then you move on to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next, and you can submit all of it in one fell swoop. You can submit all your data for quarterly annulus fill. So what do you need to actually fill out on this guy? Here's what you need. Again, it tells you, are they required? Yes or no. Are there any kind of tips or tricks, the tooltip? And what's the criteria? Because again, when you go to submit these and you see validation error, this is what it's comparing against. So for instance, you need to put the quarter it's in, which makes sense. How else are we going to track whether it's first, second, third, or fourth quarter? And it's required and needs to be first, second, third, or fourth, right? You can't put A, B, C, D, E. You can't put a quarter. You can't put quarter one, type out quarter one. That's going to cause an error. It's going to say, I'm not sure what to do with that. So again, everything's going to key off the operator name, operator number, and API. You need to have the the amount of liquid added to the annulus. And this is one that I think, at least again, I'm not saying I learn the same way as everyone. When it says it's required and must be a decimal, I think my brain goes to, a decimal being like 0.25. What that means in MiSTAR world is not an integer. So it can be 1.5, it can be 1.1. It can have digits in the decimal place. It doesn't just have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So see decimal, just type out the number it is, and you'll be okay. We have a limited number of places on those. I think if you type out, I don't know what it is exactly for this one, but if you type out 1.123459962, it's gonna truncate that. You're not gonna be able to put that many significant figures on your liquid quarterly fill in gallons. And you can put comments, you don't have to. So anything that you think we should know about it, you can put right in there. Apologize, this is actually a little bit blurry. So now you filled it out, right? Now we know we've got a filled out EDD, and I feel good about it. I put my 2 wells for the quarter. Now I want to send this off to OGMD, and I want to complete my requirement. So there's a few important things on this. And again, this is the flow of every DEDD. So this is the screen you'll see, and you'll be back to this. And you'll have any of your EDD types in here. So you need to select, you've already downloaded the template, but you need to select the quarterly annual spill, and you need to tell it the correct one. If you drop this down and you try and submit quarterly annual spill data under notification, it won't let you do, you'll get rejected, you'll get an error, and it'll say it's not the right type because it's looking for validation criteria and a different one that's not matching it. Those need to match. So you need to keep an eye on that. That's kind of tip or trick number 1. Make sure those match. That is outlined clearly in the guide, but those have to match. You have to have the fields filled out with the star, and then you click upload EDD file. So you downloaded it, you filled it out, presumably you saved it to your computer, and then you need to upload it. And so again, you can kind of ignore the stuff in here. But I just did this as a illustrative purposes for what's in the red box here. But I downloaded it, I filled it out with my 2 wells, I did this, and now I'm uploading it, and now it shows, here's your Excel file or XLSX file, and it uploaded, or it's in this kind of intermediate upload stage after you hit upload file and drove and selected your file. And now you need to hit upload. And when you do that, it will tell you one file is being processed. So it's being processed. It tells me the date, it tells me the time, it tells me the source file, and tells me the status and what it's doing. So right now that's a draft. And when I caught this, because I screen capped this as much in the middle as I could, it'll say processing. And ultimately that processing will either turn to a validated or validation errors. Again, this holds true for every EDD across the board here. So when I knew I had a good file, it says it's a draft and it's validated. And now I know this is the point in the system where I usually would pat myself on the back, but you still have one more step to go, and it's really, really important, because otherwise this is hanging out here. We don't want this hanging out here as a draft. You want this hanging out as a submitted validated file. So you would go to edit to do that. Or on the downside, you will get a message that, one file has failed validation, and instead of it saying draft and validated, it will say draft and validation errors. Either case, you can go to edit in the valid case or validation errors case and edit, and it'll tell you what's wrong with it, or it'll take you to the screen where you can submit. Or pardon me, and here's where it says that. So this is one that I did this. So below are the details. The grid matches, sorry. So I went in, and this is the one I was alluding to or talking about. I guess I wasn't alluding to it. I already submitted this. I already had this in as my test system, and it failed validation because they're duplicates. But if I wanted to do something, I could go down here and edit it if it said, hey, you left a field blank. You forgot to fill in what the actual value was for quarterly annulus fill. You can fill it in down there, or you can, if you don't want to do that, you can scrap this and start again and fix it on your spreadsheet and re-upload and start again until it validates. If you fixed it or it came out as a valid file, you hit that edit button, you drop this down from draft to pending review, and you hit update. And it's at this moment, this exact moment in time, this will process and it will go through. And now you've completed your requirement, and it has your time and date stamp. And we know this was submitted, it was validated, and it was submitted on time. So that's my 10-minute overview of kind of the general process using that quarterly annulus as an example. And of course, you can always check. If you go, I think it went through. Did it go through? Are you sure? You can always pop in view EDDs, and boom. Now I know, and I filtered this. In this case, the EDDs, these three drop downs open up. These three dots opens up your filter choice. But now I know. I did this, it came in, it's got the date, it's got accepted. This would still say probably pending, we'll accept it on the backside, but once it's in and pending, you're good to go. But you can always double check. If you're unsure, did that go where I want it to go? Did it make sense? Did it get to where it needs to be? You have that back end check on it. So if you are an eagle-eyed person and you're really deeply paying attention and reading each and every box and each and every slide, which no problem if you weren't, you have these two. Did anyone catch this? That you have upload EDD file or fill out form. Well, didn't I fill out a form here? This is a different way of submitting the same data. This is a more manual process. So if you were going to submit a lot of wells on that previous EDD, you'd have to do one for each one of these, and it would be more work. But if you had just one well and you wanted to do it this way, you could. The only downside is, in the end, you'll have that sheet that you uploaded to MiSTAR, and in this, you won't get that sheet. You have to go in and view and make sure what you submitted is what you submitted, and that's the only record of it. It's out there. You don't also have your CSV or XLSX sheet with you that shows that's your whatever I had there, Q3 or Q1, QA, EDD. But I do want to walk through this. I think it's worth it. It's built in the system, and it's worth the time to discuss it because there's a few more clicks through it. But ultimately it gets you to the same point. It's a little more manual. It's a little more one at a time. So if you do click fill out form, it'll take you to a sheet like this, where you'll have, pardon me, you'll have filled in what you want. and your organization and your description, and then you'll fill out your form, and it'll tell you, here's my date, here's what I want to do, here's the operator name, and here's what I put as a description, and I'm going to fill out this template. And so this might look a little familiar from the previous path. You just hit edit, and it'll give you basically what we filled out in the last one, just in a different form. So if these terms are starting to feel familiar, there's your header info and your data record. So you fill out your header info. It's the same operator name, operator number, report period, quarter and year, revised records. That's the exact same as is on the EDD. This isn't there's not different requirements. You'll save that, and then you'll have to hit add data record. So you filled out the header, now you're going to fill out the data record. You're only going to get one choice here, and it'll depend on the EDD, but you'll create data record. And now it's exactly what you saw on the EDD. 14-digit API, role name and number, amount of liquid added, the date it was checked, and any comments. At that point, you get a few options down here. Once you're filled out, you can, if you fill it out and fill it out correctly, you can save and return. If at this point you're like, no, I don't like this method, delete, and say, I'm going to stick to the other one. Whatever path you prefer. And you'll get the same thing. So you can go in, save and return. You'll get a draft. You'll switch that to, you have to switch it to the correct status. You'll again get a note whether your validation passed or failed before you do that. So from that last one, when you save it, it'll show you whether you're good or not. Then you can go in and edit it again if there's errors. And finally, you'll still have to go back and switch it from draft to process or pending review, pardon me. So then I went back in on this one. Apologies for the confusion there. I went in and fixed my error, and it was, I had something incorrect. Now, that's why I did this. This is gray. You can't submit this because it failed validation. And here now, it's not grayed out because it's validated and it's green. It's ready to go. I drop in pending review and hit update. And now it's submitted. And again, you can go view that in the view EDDs. So, you know, it's going to be a company by company and person by person preference. If you're doing a lot of wells, to me, it makes a lot of sense to put them on one EDD. But both of them will get the data that is required in the rules to OGMD. And again, same one. This is probably the same as the last slide, but you can go in again and check and make sure everything is actually in there. So that is like a really general, well, a specific overview of the QA EDD. And I know we took diverging paths to get to the same place, but I want to show you that there are two ways to go down, whether you download the format or you fill out the form. That's the same for any of them. You'll see the same type of option. The only thing that'll change is like the word in the field, obviously the fields you have to fill out and the data record. So now what I have is kind of, I'm going to step through each of the other three EDDs and talk about some of the tips and tricks to filling it out. There's not really tips and tricks, but they're all laid out in the validation criteria. But I wanted to spend a minute to go over them because I think, you know, if people are getting validation errors and they're getting frustrated, you know, I think there's some things we can refer back to in here that would help you out. Or again, my numbers on there, you have the numbers of the geology specialists and other folks. You can always send an email to Eagle OGMD UIC for assistance, and we can set up like we typically, even though this is a Zoom session, we typically use Teams and can do a screen share and help you out. Our goal is to really get people in and using this system. This is the system we're going to use. So anything we can do to help you get up and running is a value to everyone. So I showed this yesterday, and the point of it was, so this is that header info for the mechanical integrity or annular pressure test, EDD, pardon me, if you're doing an MIT. This is the form that you'd be currently filling out for OGMD. And my point was, aside from kind of some minor differences at the top where you're going to have to know the API number and fill that in, you're going to have the operator number on there as well, which is different from this, where you'd have the permit number and all the surface location and name and address of the permittee. You know, you have a few differences there, but everything from here on down, which is from well name and number on down, there's a spot for it on the form. All it is if you've been successful, which I know everyone has been successful filling out these forms, you will be successful filling out the equivalent EDD because you're already doing this. It's just a translation of taking this form and putting it into a columnar spreadsheet format. So I won't run through every single one of these, but you can see in what I didn't show yesterday. So this is the well header and data record. Well, this is the well header piece of it. But over on the second tab of the EDD, you have the validation requirements, or the validation criteria, pardon me. So it'll tell you, do I need to put my 14-digit API in there? Yes, you absolutely do. And it has to be, we've talked about this a few times, it has to belong to your company, and it has to be a UIC well. If you try and submit UI injection data for a production well, it's not going to be readily available in the system. There's a couple things spelled out here, particularly in the gauge. So just make sure to look at any of the specifics, right? Is it a new gauge? Yes or no? If it's a new gauge, that's great. If it's not a new gauge, then you need to provide that calibration in through that other documents. What's the maximum allowable pressure change, right? You're going to want to do that calculation. Here's one. This alludes to valid values. We'll touch on that in a minute as to what valid values really means. That's specific and it's important. And of course, you know, was anyone there? Who witnessed the test? You're already doing this. So I don't think any of this is very different. The only difference is when you submit that form, you don't necessarily get these validation criteria. You might get them on the back end where someone says, hey, you know, this field really needs to say this, or this isn't complete. So this is heading off a lot of those questions or issues for us where the criteria is out there. If you have any questions on interpretation or what needs to be in there, just let us know. You'll of course also need to put the data in there. So you'll have conducted your 30-minute test. This is a passing test. Meets all the criteria that were laid out in either 806 or 802. I don't remember if we were trying to put this as a new well or an existing well, but in either case, it all is in there. It's the same, even the exact same format as this. And those are all required. And really, I'd say the only catch to be aware of, and it even says it right here, is in military time. So if you're doing these in the afternoon, you need to use military time, but 13:02 instead of 1:02. So I don't think there's really too much to go into on that. This is something that is important. So valid values. When a form asks for a valid value, what it means is it's asking for a very specific value. And that's it's in the validation criteria. And if you don't, it's not something you're probably just going to guess necessarily correctly. So this is laid out. This is just a table that says, what is the template and what are the valid values? So let's go to the annular pressure test. Type of pressure gauge. You get two choices there, analog or digital. If you put a brand name in that box, You say, oh, this is a brand, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to work for a type of pressure gauge. So you need to have one of these values offhand. Purpose of the test. If you put, you could put 5-year test, after rework, new permitted well, or other. But if you choose, you can't, if you put an option other than this, it's going to say you have a validation error because you put in a term it's not recognizing. And of course, pass or fail. As the test result, you can't put, kind of did okay. I talked about this on the QA. 1, first, second, third, or fourth. If you type out Q1, it won't work. So these are in the guide. They're on this slide. It's something to have at hand if you're filling out EDDs. If you have this next to you, it can save you some headache. So if you're not sure what to put in a field, flip over the criteria. It'll tell you if you need one of these values, and then you'll be able to just put it right in there, and you'll be A-okay. There is some auto-populating that's done behind the scenes. So you still should put in all the criteria that are needed to define your well, but if there are things that are keying off of the other information that's provided, so basically keying off of the operator and operator number and API, that API is unique and it's assigned to a specific well name and number. So if you make a typo in this, you'll still be okay. But I'd still fill them out, but it's important to know that there's some things that the system is keying off of and will fill in case of an error. So please review your EDDs after you get them validated. This one is the one that will be the most frequent report. Of course, these are the monthly or annual injection well operating report EDD, and it's kind of, I'd say it's got a lot of pieces to it. So I've broken it down to kind of walk through it piece by piece if you're filling out this EDD. Again, this is taking a form and putting it into a columnar spreadsheet type format. So again, it's going to be the same type: operator name, number, the report type, the report period, and are there revised records or not. So you might not necessarily be completely used to putting the operator number on here, but it still matches up. A lot of this matches up with the top portion of this form. So what is this report for? What month, year? What month, year? Yep. So, and what do you need to put in for those? So again, this is the well header info. This is from the data validation, or pardon me, the validation criteria tab. So operator names required, all of it's required on the top here, and it tells you, right, what do I put for report type? That seems open-ended. Is it injection report? Is it, what do I need to put? Flip over to that validation tab and it'll tell you that is either monthly or annual, right? It's monthly if it's not a secondary recovery well, annual if it is a secondary recovery well. So there's a lot of information that people work really hard on to make sure that you know what to put in these boxes. And if you're unsure, please flip over to that validation criteria. If you still have questions, please let us know. Well, then you need to actually fill it out. And this is month or week, very much akin to this form. The injection pressure, the annulus pressure, the rate, and the weekly or monthly volume injection. So this literally just follows boom, 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 boom right across here. I think I might have missed something here, but that's okay. I may have made an error on the slide because I have numbers up here that I didn't discuss. That's okay. We'll work back through that. And again, so month or week, all of this is required. So we're down in the record. It's all required. And it has to be numeric well, I'll have to double back and grab that slide. So when I put these slides out for us, I'll make sure I highlight. See, I kind of skipped over. I have a skip in these. And then again, so at the bottom, you'd be used to filling out the maximum and the average, and you're just going to carry that right across. Volume injected, max, max injection rate, annulus pressure, injection pressure. Did you have any changes in the source characteristics? If you recall from yesterday when I was talking about these, there are places specifically, that we've talked about this. You're going to report your inject date annually unless there's changes in sources or characteristics. So did you have any change? What's the specific gravity? When was that measured? And if you had any overages or exceedances, pardon me, it might be exceedances or anomalies or problems, this is a good place to report that. And again, these are all required. And we've talked a little bit about what decimal, obviously you're in specific gravity, frequently that'll be a value above 1. You're talking about brine, right? 1.1, 1.2, something like that. Just put it in as it is. Decimal does not mean it needs to be less than 1. Okay, so I apologize. So I had these, I'll make sure that slide gets in there, but this was the front part of that was numbers 9, 10, 11, 12, I think, that I called out on here. So these guys up here is this first portion of this. So this is what this thing actually looks like if you download the sheet and you start filling it out. So what did I do? I put in, again, this is made up, but OGMD, this is my operator number. I said this is a monthly, and I made it for 12/21. I don't know why I did that. And it's not revised records. So this is where it is a bit different from the form. The form you have is applicable to a single well. The EDD is applicable to n number of wells. So in this case, I did month. This is a monthly report, right? We said monthly. And these are the weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is the well it's for. API number, all the same. Well name and number, all the same. Well type, the same. Injection fluid, the same. You can tell these are not, we can look, when we look at the criteria, validation criteria, that those aren't necessarily required fields. But these all have to have a value. Again, I talked about sometimes it's in our nature to kind of go do something and see when you get an error. So when the first time I did this, I went along, I filled out the API number, I filled out line, well, in this case, line 11. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, put in all the values, put in the rest of it, tried to validate it, and it said, validation errors. What did I do wrong? Well, if I had gone through and tried not to, and I've read some of the documentation that was put together, it says you need to do it on every line, because you can take this for like wells, for another well that requires monthly reporting, and put the next API. So you can put the next API, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fill down for all these for the appropriate well, put in your information, and now you have 2 monthly reports in there. So the fill down might be a bit different, but the purpose is that every line is going to where it needs to go, and it's accounted for, it's assigned to the right well. And you can put, again, n number of wells on this. One catch, so tip or trick for this is that you cannot mix. This report type has to be monthly or annual. So you can't put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for an EOR well, and then, my company also has a brine injection well, and that reports monthly. So then put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't mix report types because the report type is defined up here. So you can group all your monthlies with monthlies, so you can group all your annuals with annuals, but you can't mix and match monthly and annual on a single form. You will get validation errors. You'll never get that to validate, even if you fill out every line correctly, because it'll be the report type won't match. So I know that's a lot to take in on that portion of it. And this is, sorry, so we filled out our header, we're filling out our data record. So this is kind of all the well information. This is all the specific, right? I went out and I looked every single week and I reported these numbers. And then this is a continuation, so I couldn't kind of fit it all neatly. These are the same, if we go back, line 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. These are the same, it's reporting back to the same well. Like I said, it's just not neat to scroll to fit all on one page. This is the same kind of as that first part. The cumulative injected volume, for this case, it was 185. This is in barrels or MCF, and you have to fill this down. Max pressure, max annulus pressure, max injection rate, all this needs to be filled down because it's all going to go into our database. So if you just fill in the top line, it will not validate. You need to make sure that there's data on every line for all the wells. So that's an important one. This is, right, I don't think I got into like bold caps too much in any of these presentations, but if you don't fill them down and you don't fill them out, you're going to end up with a validation error. And if you're like me and I didn't read this stuff ahead of time, I was scratching my head and then I went back and referenced it. And I said, oh, I really wish I had read what was out there first, but I didn't. I tried to go just do it on my own. So that's what I have. Again, I will fix that one portion of the upper one for when I put the slides out. But that's what I have on the well annulus, or pardon me, the injection reporting EDD. And then you can flip over, again, there's a validation tab and you can go line by line, what's required, what's not required, and what should be filled in there. And again, refer back to those valid values. If you try and put report type January, won't work. So while there are some, I think it's generally pretty intuitive. And if you see something that's not super, like I'm not 100% sure, please flip over to that validation criteria tab. And I'd say, I don't want to say 10 times out of 10, but the vast majority of the time you will find your answer right on that next tab. Okay, so we've been here an hour, got 2 more EDDs to go through. We can, maybe just 1 more EDD to go through actually, and then one other piece of information, and then we can click around a little bit if we want to. I was kind of advised against doing that, like I said, but we'll see if we can get it up and going, and if we can, you can see kind of what a little bit of the look and feel of this beyond the slides. So the well notification EDD is another simple one. There's a lot of fields you need to fill out for an injection report. There's a lot of fields you need to fill out on the form. There's a lot of data that's in there. The QA, pretty straightforward. Same with the well notification. So this EDD is for letting us know if you have a loss of mechanical integrity or you're scheduling a mechanical integrity test. Again, if you lose mechanical integrity, right, the requirements are 24-hour notice, 5-day written. You can just pop right in this system, fill it out, send it off, and that can serve as both if you do it within a day. So really all you need is your operator name and number, what the API is, what the well name and number is. And this one has a little more detail: county name, township name, and the notification type. And this says, if you can't read that, it's kind of small. List of valid values. If you remember back from that slide a few slides ago, right? It's either there's 2 valid values in there, whether you have a notice of loss of mechanical integrity or notice of MIT scheduled. We won't go back to it right this second. What's the date? What's the time that's applicable, right? Let's just say it's a loss of mechanical integrity. When did that loss happen? Or when are you going to go do your test? And that needs to be, again, at least with preferably extra notice, 5 days. And then you can add a description of that as well. So here we go. Thank you, Jason, for doing this. So operator name and number required. I think you're getting the feel for this. API digit, API needs to be on there. If you populate your API, that will populate your well name and number. I'd still suggest generally putting it in there. The county, the township, what notification type. Let's see list of valid values. Must be a valid value. Where are those valid values? Oh, I have them. They're in a table in this presentation. The slides will be out there. They're in the guide as well. And I need to put in loss of mechanical integrity, notice of loss of mechanical integrity, or notice of MIT scheduled. And that'll process right through. So we've now been through at least all of the EDDs, all 4 of them in some way, shape, or form. Again, that process of downloading it, filling it out, checking your validation criteria, uploading it, checking whether it's validated or not, and then fixing your errors or not, or it's already validated ideally, and then hitting that drop down from draft to the net, move it on to the next step and hitting update. That is true for all of these. But I said this slide was at the beginning. This was in yesterday's presentation. There aren't EDs for everything, right? We've talked about it. My inject data analysis. I got this PDF from a third-party company that did my inject data analysis. What do I do with that? And all of these can come in various formats. So those come in through submit documents. So we had our submit EDD over here and view EDD. Now we'll have submit documents. So if you hit submit documents and you choose new plus new document upload, you'll get this. And this is very small to read, so I will read it. Allowed file types, doc, docx, XLS, XLSX, PDF, TIFF, and 20 megabyte max file size. All those files really should be smaller than that. I mean, this presentation isn't even that big. But if you try and upload something bigger than that, you will get an error. I tried it. That is a hard limit. So you select what your document type is. And that'll give you, when you put that drop down, that'll give you those choices that you had from the previous screen, plus a couple other choices. So one in here, correspondence. That's a place if you had, let's just say if you had an EOR well and you had an exceedance of maximum injection pressure and the guidance says, hey, put it on the next report. Well, if I just made my last report for the last year, maybe I could put that in through correspondence rather than putting it on my next form, which might not be for say 10 or 12 months. You could drop it right in there. But if you had an injected analysis, an annual injected analysis, you just click here. You'll select your relevant date. And this is the next most important part here. You select the associated wells, because if you can imagine, we have about 1,200 injection wells. And if we just get annual injected analysis, and it has no association, it's going to be tough to figure out where did this come from and what's going on. So with this, you can search by well name, API number, or permit number. And you can select as many associated wells as you need. So if that injected analysis applies to 3 wells, you search them and select them, and you pick your 3 wells. So I showed an example of that. I should have selected injected analysis here. But we have 3 wells here, 1, 2, 3, and you can select n number of wells. So you need to fill out these with an asterisk. So what's the document type? What's the file it's coming from? Select the associated wells. And when you have all those things filled out correctly, you will get the save button will turn from gray to blue or gray to green, whatever the appropriate final color is for it. And you'll be able to submit any of those other types of documents. So I know that was a fast run through of that, but it's a pretty straightforward process. So it is just, what do you want to submit? How do you want to get to it? And what are the associated wells, and submit it. So you will have, like I said, whether it's one of those half a dozen types of, whether it's a gauge record, whether it's an MIT chart. Again, if we're just getting MIT charts with no well, it could be very, which MIT does this go with? Where does it go? Giving it an associated well is a requirement, and it's really helps us sort everything out. And then again, you'll be able to see, here's all my submitted documents, and this should start to be looking familiar. Hey, I want to search this, which by, I want to search this and I want to see the document I submitted. Well, you can filter it, you can customize what you see, and you'll see all your documents down here. So that was a lot of pointing and talking. I do want to pause here for a second. I saw one question was out there and got answered, and I see one that's hanging out there on permit modification requests. I think maybe it would be perhaps a good time, in case things go sideways on the demo, maybe take a pause and do some questions, and then we can do a few click arounds in MiSTAR if there are questions. Does that sound like a good plan? So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and get myself squared away on the other side of this. But if there's any questions, please throw a hand up, throw them in the chat. If anyone's still out there, let me know. Otherwise, I will start pulling some stuff up, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, I'm not hearing
Jason,
anything.
we do have a couple questions in the hopper if you're interested in taking those.
Yeah, let's share that screen, and yeah.
So this first one is, can a permit modification request be submitted through the MiSTAR system?
No.
That's
Nope,
quick.
that's a MiSTAR is not made for that, so that would have to be done through through the permitting group and through the standard way of modifying permits. But no, MiSTAR is not equipped for that. So MiSTAR is equipped for the regulatory injection reporting requirements, but unfortunately, no, not for permit modifications.
Okay. The other one was just a thank you comment.
Yeah, it looks like Vicky had a question that I think Carrie answered. So thank you, Carrie, for answering Vicky's question. Oh, Mark's going to get in on that answer too. So thank you, Mark. All right, so while we have a couple minutes here, if you're still with me, if you need a cup of coffee, I understand. This is the web page we were talking about yesterday. So that address, actually, Matt dropped that out in the chat. So if you're still looking for documents and materials, your letter of assurance is down here, well permittee organizational report. It's linked to the MiSTAR system, user guide, and we'll update the frequently asked questions as well. So I'm going to do something dangerous and log into MiSTAR. So that's what you'll get. If you go to the MiSTAR page, you'll get your login. You get your login screen, and it'll take you a second. You can see it spinning there. And like I said, I'm hoping in live demo world that it doesn't go super slow on me or anything. So hopefully that'll get in there. All right. So really it would take you to the home page. And again, this should be pretty familiar. This is what people, this is what you'd be seeing. This is what I've had in the, this is what I've had up in the chat. And let's also bring up, well, we'll do it. So let's go to submit EDD. So let's say I know I want to put in a quarterly annual spill report. I'll go to download. Now it tells me, all right, my file is downloaded. It's going to open Excel here on my other screen, and I'll drag it over once it opens up. Because I showed you a little bit about this kind of screen caps of what those all look like, but I didn't do probably justice of these two tabs. I should have had a screen cap for that. So quarterly annual fill, we've seen what needs to go in here, how this works. So I can put in all my fills for that quarter. Now I know, we know that report period is a valid value and any comments. So this is the actual EDD. And this is what I've been talking about. So I've showed it, but I didn't show very well this transition between these two. So there's your EDD, and there's where you get your validation criteria. So this tells you, what do I need to put in these boxes, and do I have to put them in there? So you don't have to put comments on any or every quarterly annual spill unless you want to. But you can just go ahead, fill that out, and save it. And if you wanted to, you could do, I'll choose this because I use this as a test. I filled that out. Now I upload the EDD. I have a preformed EDD for that. Shows it, and I can hit upload now. It's going to throw me an error because I've already done this. So it'll say draft processing, and eventually it's going to throw me an error and say, this is a duplicate. Validation errors. So then I can go into edit and see what's wrong with it. And if it was something like I left the report quarter blank, I could go in and change it here and fix it. Or I could change each line of it. In this case, you just change what you need and hit save, and you would be fine. In this case, since it's already in there, and you might run into this case where you start getting down an EDD road and you're not sure, or you get a validation error and you realize, hey, I made an error on every single well and I had 50 wells. You can hit delete and get that out and say, okay, I'm not going to do that right this second. And now if I went to view EDDs, you wouldn't see it, right? You kind of have, until you put that from draft to process review, you have an out. You have the ability to kind of scrap what you're doing. So if you want to just practice doing things, you can get them to a certain point and see if they validate. But I do want to make the point, and it's actually a very important point, is that you need, MiSTAR is live, it's in production mode. So anything you're putting into the system needs to be real data. And again, if you put in real data that we've already imported over from RBDMS, you'll get a note of, you'll see it'll give you an error or a validation error that data is already in the system. So I think a good way, one good way to potentially practice with some of this is to kind of get them to that point where things validate, and then you could delete it, and you could then say, okay, I know what I need to do to get this to be a valid value, or pardon me, what I need to get this to be validated, excuse me. One thing I also did not show on there is on the, well injection template. On the injection template, I didn't necessarily go through what's required and what's not required. And I saw a question out of the corner of my eye. You can see what is required and what's not required. So Permanent max injection pressure is not required to be on there. We have those. We'll eventually populate MiSTAR with them. We'll also have, if you're in there looking at MiSTAR, we've updated it with some MIT dates. We're still working on getting that final list, and we'll update it when we have our final list. Understandably, we haven't necessarily gotten every single MIT as we're kind of coming down the line here. We will get those updated, but if you see something in there that doesn't look quite right, don't be alarmed. Just follow the schedule, and we will get those modified. Not every single last MIT is fully up to date yet. We're working on getting that updated and correct before primacy. But if not, follow what you know, and realize there might be a couple of occasions where we're going to reach out and ask folks for, hey, this is what I have for the last MIT date. There might be a case where we say, hey, this is the last MIT date I have, you're due. And you might say, oh no, I did one here. Send, so we essentially have the right to ask for records and last MITs if there's any question around them. So there might be a couple inquiries on that. Should be very few, but that possibility is out there. So yeah, I saw one in there, like I said, about what's required. I didn't go through this. I can amend these for when I put out the slides to have this as well for the validation criteria for the injection reporting. So no, you don't have to have those two on there, but we have them. And of course, you don't need to know if you didn't have any anomalies or MIP exceeded or problems, then you wouldn't need to put anything in that field. So it's not a required field. That's one that let's just say can get validated. So let's do a well notification. I'm going to do another one here. Call this test. I'm going to upload an EDD file. I have this in here, and I know this will work. So this says, hey, Eagle, OGMB, I want to schedule an MIT. Well, what does this thing look like? Hey, I filled out my EDD. I want to do it at 8:30 in the morning. This is obviously a past one. This test has already happened successfully. And there it is. Got it all set. So then I could move that to pending review and hit update, and that would transfer right over into the system. So it validated, straightforward, easy to use, and it would be good to go. If you wanted to, again, we'll take a quick look at the UIC Wellbores, because that's one I talked about. So if you do nothing with this, it's going to take a second to load because it's loading every single UIC wellbore in the state of Michigan. But let's look. If I want to search for, well, let's just say I want to put these alphabetically by operator. So I just go to operator, click that button, and now I'm sorted on operator. So this is an example where if you want to find a specific well, let's find this well right on top. If I I only get those 3 criteria to search by. And so if I start typing A and R, I'm not going to get any values returned. But if I say, oh, I want to put in, don't need last inspection, but I want permit number. Let's put that on there. I want to search for that permit number. I can type that in. I've got it, no problem. Or I could type in the well name. Many ways to find the same thing. If you want to go in and filter it, again, we kind of went over this in the slides. Hey, I want just the ones for my company. Well, it can be begins with or contains. Let's say contains. And since we see these here, let's just continue that. And I don't need to type the whole thing. It's going to filter as I type. And now I've got those, and I can go out and I can export these. If you don't prefer to sort within this system, I mean, you can export the whole list right here out to Excel. And if you prefer to do your data manipulation or your sorting and filtering, you can export everything right out and do it in there. That works too. So again, these are cumulative. You can search by well type. You can go by well status. You have just a wealth of options. So I think we've covered, we've kind of gone very quickly to click through of what it would look like to submit an EDD, what it would look like to get my wellbores out of there. Let's look at documents. I can upload a new document. I could choose the file type. So in this case, again, I had done my practice in there. So that's not a super specific name, but it was an inject date annual. I can select that. You would have this, if you're on the operator side, I'm in the OGMD side up here, you just get one option to submit. And so I think it's just grayed out. You put in the relevant date for it. And this is where it's important to associate the wells. So again, well name, API number, permit number. I know specifically this is one of the wells that's associated with it. I believe there's others. And now I've filled out all the fields that have asterisks. I can put whatever notes I want, and I have the ability to save this. Now, one kind of important thing to know on this is there isn't, because of the nature of this, because you're putting in PDFs, there isn't a validation criteria around this. So you have to make sure that you are selecting the correct document type and uploading the correct document. So just make sure to do the cross-check, or we'll end up, you can see, you might get one that gets rejected and kicked back to you because, hey, you told me this was an annual inject date analysis, but what you actually submitted was correspondence, or what you actually submitted was a gauge record. And we want to be able to sort and filter them correctly. But quite easy to upload documents associated with the regulatory requirements. If you submit a well notification, as I didn't fully go through there, but you say, oh, hey, I notified OGMD of 3 upcoming MITs, and I'm not sure if they went through the system, you would go to the well notification list. And again, you can sort and filter just the same as any other, by your company, by the date, by whatever field you prefer to sort by. So if you want to check, did that one go through? You have it right here to be able to look and keep track of. Otherwise, any other type, you can go over here and view EDDs. And, okay, so let's sort this. Like I said, this has a little hamburger. Filter contains Baylor. Let's filter it. And that's why, okay, I put, this was testing data. So now I can see, okay, that's why my QA report said it was duplicate. It's already in there and I can go look at it. So it's really, I didn't have anything further to click through. I think I hope that helps people along. I apologize, there was the one error there on the slide that I will get remedied before I PDF the slides and get them out there. I skipped over one section of that injection EDD. So that was an error on my part, but it's a pretty, in my mind, there have been a lot of people who work very hard to make this a straightforward system and kind of the least onerous system that we can make it. And hopefully a very useful and intuitive system. And if you aren't sure, go download, straight away, go download those download those EDDs and still check, get comfortable with them. Check the validation criteria, check the header type. Do I have all the information up here that I need? If not, I can go grab that. Or if I don't know something, let me double check with OGMD before I go to submit things. So all the EDDs are in there. Everything is kind of available for you. I am asking you to please go out there and check your, check your UIC wellbores. Make sure that the wellbores that we say are in there are the ones you agree with. And if you see any oddities, any ones that are off, please let us know. I don't necessarily expect that, but so things can happen to where there could have been one that got tagged incorrectly, or there could have been one that was a really super recent one and it hasn't made it in there yet. So please check and make sure that you're good with it. We'll start getting usernames and passwords and everything out for this shortly, so that you can go in and take a look. Again, just super quick, my kind of warning would be that this, again, should be real data. You can kind of, I guess, you can take a draft pretty far without submitting it and still check that you're filling out the fields correctly. I see questions out here. So that letter of assurance, if you've looked at it, says that this is a very new system. We want to make sure people are comfortable with it and are doing it correctly. So we want to make sure that people are submitting still related to that 2019 letter to operators through the inbox or through the mail, preferably through the inbox, and doing MiSTAR. So we can compare the two and make sure everything matches up. And as long as you're good and comfortable, as long as you're ready to go with it, we will, up to 90 days, we will then say, hey, just submit in MiSTAR from now on. There's also one kind of odds and ends point I want to bring up. So there are kind of a flurry of MITs that the EPA scheduled at the end of August here, before the transition of primacy. If you have an upcoming MIT in September, that 5-day notice is there, it's in effect. Please, even if you don't have, it might take you a minute to get a signature on that letter of assurance and get all your forms submitted. Please use the 2019 letter, go by that, notify us of an upcoming MIT, and we'll get it on the schedule. So if you have one upcoming and you don't have MiSTAR up and running just yet, we still need to be notified so that we can get that test conducted and get it witnessed and get it completed. Hopefully a successful test. So again, I think that's all I have. I see that folks have been answering a lot of questions, so I appreciate Mark and Carrie jumping in on the chat again. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Pull the questions over. So yes, so the last one for the anonymous attendee, you'll be submitting August like you do. So the EPA, we mentioned it, will still need their August reports. And then you'll still submit standard through us, and then it'll switch to us, and you'll still have to do a kind of a brief period of getting yourself into MiSTAR and submitting, and also submitting, the quote unquote paper report, so that we're verifying that everything's good, they both match, and everyone's kind of filling out the correct EDs in the correct fashion. And once you get the A-OK on that, then you'll just be taken off and you'll be all experts in MiSTAR. So I know it's a new system, but I think it'll really help us with compliance assistance and data management. And in the end, I'm hoping it'll also be beneficial for operators to be able to submit so much data, all in one form, rather than submitting, say, individual forms for, rather than submitting individual forms for each well. So I think it will be beneficial to everyone. I appreciate very much the folks who have asked for the recordings. We'll get these out there shortly. We'll get the slides out there shortly. And we'll make sure that if there, like I said, I've offered it quite a few times. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We want people using this. We want people in the system, and I appreciate the early enthusiasm of all the reports, or pardon me, all the letters of assurance and organizational permittee organization reports we've received in just the last like 24 hours since the last session. So I'm really encouraged to see the enthusiasm and appreciate folks working with us on that.
So we've got a lot of questions kind of behind the scenes that staff have already answered. If you open up the Q&A or the Q&A box and look at that answered, I wondered, Mark or Jason, if you would maybe take a moment to just scan through those and see if there's anything that you want to expand on and share with those that are still online.
Nope, and we'll compile what we need to out of this, but that question, which I apologize, Olivia, I just said no, because I was trying to move a little bit quickly, but can permit modification requests be submitted through MiSTAR? No, they're detailed in Rule 815. So if they're minor, they can be submitted to the inbox, or if they're major modifications, then they're going to open up to the permits and bonding unit, because those will be subject to 802 and 803. Carrie answered, do any of the boxes that require specific language have a drop down? Currently, there's not a drop down, but we do have those lists of either in the tooltip or in the valid values, what's required in those fields. But I do appreciate that as a suggestion. Source approval is a permit mod. Those, yeah, Mark said, go to the UIC inbox. We got a question around what's the definition of an operator number versus an operator name. So the operator name is the number operators are assigned when they are created in the database, and this will be provided to you with your login information. So when we send you your MiSTAR username and password, you'll also get your operator number. So you don't have to, if you don't have it handy, you won't have to dig for it. Do we need to still send an annual analytical report? Yes, you do. That's Rule 810.8. Thank you, Mark. Yesterday, you mentioned our letters of guarantees. So there's a question around the current bonding and our letters of guarantees allowed, or what types of bonds. And Mark referred, I don't believe everyone can see this, so this would be a good one. I'll put it certainly in the FAQs about the web page for what types of bond instruments are accepted. I'll be sure to put that in the FAQs. Nope, and Mark asked, in the sample shown, there were no values entered for the permitted maximum, the permitted pressure and volume. Those aren't required. Those will be auto-populated. So we'll have those in MiSTAR, and you won't have to put them in. Since third quarter monitoring reports will be filed with Eagle, should third quarter monitoring reports be filed with Eagle rather than the EPA? And I would agree with Mark and say yes, that those third quarter reports should go to us. No later than 45 days after the end of the quarter. Yes, and yes, this is absolutely so. The question was assuming for Class II source approvals. Yes, this is all Class II. Class II wells, there is maybe future potential to expand MiSTAR to other classes of wells, but that's not how it's being launched. So only Class II, Class I will still go to Ray Vagrinovich. And yes, there's a hope that we will expand this to other classes as well. Do we need to send in monthly and quarterly copies of our manifest? No, those aren't required by OGMD. The website should be out there in the chat. I believe Matt posted that early on. If not, I can send that out to folks as well. Yep, so Matt reposted that link. There's a question around the specific gravity. Yeah, and you'd submit, so on that specific gravity, you'll note on that form, it's asking for the relevant date. So that's not necessarily a monthly, certainly not a monthly measurement. It's just asking basically to account for if anything has changed with those. This is for all SWD. Do we still send Eagle monthly oil and gas reports? Yes, this is just for Class II. We are in the process of doing similar functionality for production reporting, and someone else will be running the webinars on those, hopefully. But look forward to that, probably 2023. I answered the question around submitting August information versus September. If you have a well that's under an enforcement and has not been released, you should still use the MiSTAR system. Will still be the way that OGMD will be taking in. That's the preferred way. That's the way that we're going to be taking in the injection well data. And if you missed yesterday's session, again, we'll get both of the recordings out to attendees, and we'll get them posted on the website as soon as it's fully ready. As I said, there's one more little step to go through, but there will be a link that goes out to registered attendees, and we'll get the slides up shortly, and we'll get the recordings up as soon as they're available. So I know that was quick fire, and we don't have a ton of time, but if there's additional questions, can let it sit for a minute here. And if not, we can call it on the session, and either way, I'll kind of give my wrap up, and then if we see any questions pop up, we'll take those. But I just want to say thank you again. I really appreciate everybody, everybody's time and attention. I know this subject matter isn't necessarily, I think there's a lot of excitement around primacy. There's a lot of excitement around primacy, but there's not necessarily, there's a lot of administrative steps that we need to go through to get there. And I just want to make sure that we're all starting off on the same page and the same foot. And again, I appreciate people's time and attention. And like I said, I've received quite a few requests for folks who weren't able to attend and have requested the link to the recording. So we'll get all that stuff out there just as soon as we possibly can. So thank you again. And if no one else has anything, I think I didn't see any, I don't believe I saw any new questions pop up.
Yeah, just want to remind attendees that whether you registered for only one of these or you registered for both of these, we'll do a follow-up email that goes to everybody that'll have both of the recording links in there, as well as the presentations. And then, like Jason has indicated, there will be a landing page for these on the MiSTAR website, and we will share that information with you. So look for an email from us in the next day or so. And we appreciate you joining us for these sessions. So thank you.